What if everything you've been told about love, equality, masculinity, and femininity is a lie? What if behind the beautiful words about harmony lies a biological drama, where the roles were assigned not by culture, but by nature itself? What if love isn't the union of souls, but a carefully directed illusion designed to make you follow someone else's script, not your own will? Arthur Schopenhauer claimed exactly that, and his words sound even more dangerous today than they did in the 21st century. Are you ready to hear what no one dares to say, but what you've always felt deep down? Then stay focused. It's going to hurt, but it will be honest. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Have you ever felt a rising tension in your chest when you're confronted with an idea that contradicts everything you've been taught? As if one part of your mind, the rational, educated, socialized part, is shouting, "This must not be taken seriously." But beneath that reactive wave, another part whispers, an older, primal, feeling part, "What if it's true?" That's exactly the kind of response Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy provokes when he speaks about men, women, and the nature of their relationships. Schopenhauer didn't seek approval. He didn't soften his words. He spoke out loud what others didn't even dare to think. His statements sound like a slap in the face to ears raised on ideas of gender equality and identity. Men and women, he claimed, are not just different, they are fundamentally opposite, not by upbringing, but by nature. Women are not made for great discoveries, he wrote. Their strength lies elsewhere, in instinctive insight, in the ability to influence without direct power, in the skill to manipulate emotions rather than concepts. This is not an accusation, it's a recognition of the hidden architecture of existence. As someone who has spent years observing, I can't help but agree. The more I watch the dynamics between the sexes in relationships, in conversations, in their reactions to pain or admiration, the clearer Schopenhauer's words become. It's like the difference between fire and water. Both carry power, but their paths are opposite. Men are driven by a desire to conquer, to prove their worth through action, thought, and ambition. Women, on the other hand, are masters of the inner landscape, artists of the subtlest movements of emotion. And in that lies their strength. It's not weakness, it's not secondary, it's simply different. Schopenhauer argued that the love we so passionately celebrate is an illusion, a careful construct of nature designed for the continuation of the species. It doesn't create happiness, it creates attraction, a temporary obsession meant to trigger the mechanism of reproduction. It sounds harsh, but if you look closely at reality, how many love stories truly end happily? And how many are built on unconscious biological drives, dressed up in cultural expectations? I recall my own experiences, how a vivid emotion would suddenly give way to a sense of emptiness once the chemistry faded. What remained was clarity. It wasn't a union of souls, it was a biological flare-up, delicately wrapped in romance. This is Schopenhauer's core revelation. Behind the cultural rhetoric, behind talk of equality and shared desires, lies biology, ancient, unchanging, and merciless. According to Schopenhauer, women are not driven by a quest for truth or power, but by the instinct for survival, the search for security and emotional comfort. Men, on the other hand, are obsessed with creation, conquest, and achieving immortality through their work. These drives are not equal, they are complementary, but not the same. Personally, I didn't come to this conclusion right away. I resisted it for a long time, the way we resist the obvious when it threatens to shatter our illusions, but experience is the best teacher. It strips away the politeness, revealing what's real, and in that there is freedom. When I stopped expecting masculine logic, rationality, and the will to fight alongside me from a woman, and instead saw something else, the wisdom of the body, intuition, emotional fluidity, I stopped feeling disappointed. I began to see her as a being of a different order, not lesser, not greater, just different. And that opened the path to respect, to acceptance, to a genuine connection without illusions. Schopenhauer said, "Men are made for action. Women for preservation." This isn't a social construct, it's the axis around which human interaction revolves. While man builds the world, woman guards its balance. She doesn't impose her will, she slips through, enchants, guides. That's why her influence is often invisible, yet all-encompassing. This is feminine alchemy, subtle control through emotion. When I think of my grandmother, a woman who never held public power, yet held the entire family together, I see how accurate Schopenhauer's words are. Her strength wasn't in loud declarations, but in shaping an invisible field. A field where a man feels like a hero, even as he's gently guided by a soft hand. This is the feminine strategy like fine silk. You don't see it, but it wraps around everything. This is the hidden truth the modern world is so afraid to admit. Because once we acknowledge it, we lose the right to maintain the illusion that everything can be achieved through upbringing, equal rights, and proper education. But nature is not a democracy. It doesn't care about equality, it cares about survival. And in that lies its brutal honesty. Man is the warrior, woman, the wise witch. He moves forward, she weaves the contours of fate. And here's what's especially important. The more we try to erase these differences, the stronger the inner conflict becomes. Because, as Jung wrote, everything repressed returns. When we refuse to recognize the distinctions between the sexes, we invite chaos. A man who doesn't know that his strength lies in striving loses himself. A woman who's cut off from her natural intuition and shadow becomes anxious, fragmented. Nature does not forgive substitutions. It returns us to itself, sometimes through pain. And in this sense, Schopenhauer is not a misogynist, not an enemy of women. He is a witness to the reality we refuse to see. And I stand with him, because the truth, even if unpleasant, provides a foundation. It frees us from naivety and restores clarity. It shows that a woman's true strength lies not in imitating man, but in accepting her difference. And it is this that makes her irreplaceable, not a competitor, but an ally. Not a reflection, but an opposite without which balance is impossible. When I acknowledge this, I stop fighting life. I learn to dance to its rhythm. And in this dance, everyone plays their role, not equal, but necessary. And perhaps this is where our deepest point of meaning truly lies. Among the many invisible levers of influence, as subtle as the scent of a fleeting thought, Schopenhauer particularly emphasized the power embedded in beauty, not as an aesthetic ideal, but as a biological phenomenon capable of disrupting the course of reason and altering social dynamics without a single command. Beauty, he wrote, is a bait that works faster than words, deeper than logic, immeasurably more powerful than force. And like a flash of light in a dark cave, it leaves no choice. Attraction occurs beyond the will, bypassing the consciousness. But in Schopenhauer's system of coordinates, beauty alone is not enough. Its power is amplified in tandem with emotional intuition, that ancient sense which allows one to feel the weak spots of others, anticipate the twists of events, and manipulate them, much like a conductor with a barely perceptible movement of the hand. This form of power doesn't require thrones or regalia. It operates from the shadows. It lives in a half glance, in intonation, in the pause between words. It is this power that determines who will stay and who will leave, what decisions the leader will make and in whose interest. It is not the management of force, but a shift in focus, elusive, yet all-encompassing. I recall a story from my life when, during an important meeting, one of my partners, known for his unyielding rigidity, suddenly changed his point of view. It later turned out that the reason for this shift was his companion. Her gaze, broken outside of the discussion, but piercing in its strength. She didn't speak, she guided. This is exactly what Schopenhauer wrote about, influence without form, yet capable of changing the form of the world. He argued that men rule openly, but are governed by hidden forces. Women, in his view, shape those who make decisions, and in that lies their true power. Men build the world, but women build men. Not a metaphor, but an anatomy of the historical process. One only needs to look closely at how this truth emerges across different eras, from the mistresses of kings to the first ladies, whose words shaped wars and worlds. From the humble mothers of great thinkers to the shadowy advisors whose names are forgotten, yet whose influence remains. Schopenhauer saw one of the key points of distinction between men and women in time. A man, he wrote, lives for the project of the future. He is a strategist, a builder, passionately obsessed with the idea of legacy, meaning, and achievements. His nature demands a distant horizon, even if it means sacrificing the present. A woman, in his view, is rooted in the present moment. She feels it as though it were the last. Not because she is incapable of dreaming, but because her attention is directed not toward eternity, but toward the concrete, security, order, harmony. He dreams of a tower, she of a roof. I remember how, in my youth, obsessed with the idea of my own project, I almost lost touch with reality. I was living in the future, money that wasn't spent, time that wasn't lived, closeness that was postponed. My then partner, on the other hand, tried to anchor me in the present, in the moment, in the details. I didn't understand it at the time. Only later, after breakdowns, unspoken words, and losses, did I realize we were looking in different directions of time, and there was no fault in that. It was biology, nature, different settings, not a system error. The greatest irony Schopenhauer catches is that it is precisely because of this differing direction that humans develop. Men risk everything for the future, and in that lies their greatness and tragedy. Women shape the present, and in that lies their wisdom and restraint. He storms ahead, she holds steady, one without the other chaos or stagnation. But the most painful, the most dangerous for our ego, is Schopenhauer's view on love. He debunks it mercilessly, like a surgeon removing a tumor, even one that seems beautiful. According to him, love is not a transcendent feeling, but a tool of nature. An illusion created not for happiness, but for reproduction. Everything that seems lofty is merely smoke from instinct, he wrote. And we tend to reject such words because they shatter the romantic myth that a generation has been raised on. But deep down, we know there is truth in this. Everyone has seen it, how passion fades after a child is born, how eternal love dwindles once the biological task is fulfilled, how devotion turns into disappointment, and not because anyone was at fault, but because love had an expiration date, like any natural reaction. Schopenhauer did not condemn. He observed, a man is attracted to youth, not because it is beautiful, but because it symbolizes fertility. A woman is drawn to status and power, not out of selfishness, but because it is an instinctive survival strategy. Infatuation is not a choice, but a triggered mechanism. And when the goal is achieved, the mechanism turns off. Personally, I have experienced this transition. Infatuation, which seemed eternal, shattered after the birth of my son. I fought for the feelings, tried to resurrect them, until I realized, it is not a matter of feelings, it is a matter of design. And in this realization lies a cold but honest freedom. I stopped blaming and started observing. This observation leads Schopenhauer to yet another almost taboo conclusion. Men and women manipulate each other unconsciously, naturally. Men simulate depth to gain intimacy, women depth to gain protection. We all wear masks, because beneath them lie evolutionary tasks. We don't choose them, we are built into them. And once the goal is achieved, intimacy, family, status, passion, it fades. Not because the feelings are gone, but because the mask is no longer needed. One can be angry about this, one can reject it, but I have seen it too often. Friends lose interest once they've achieved their goal. Women lose respect once they've gained stability. It repeats again and again, not because we are bad, but because we are biological. And love is the architecture of instinct, not of metaphysics. Finally, Schopenhauer draws a conclusion that today is considered almost criminal. The expansion of female influence in society, in his view, carries a risk. Not because women are worse, but because they are guided by different principles. Not logic, but instinct, not strategy, but emotion. Not duty, but relationships. For him, this is not a disqualification, but a warning. A stable society is built on predictability. And if those in power do not think strategically, the system collapses. Female power is great in the realm of family, upbringing, and relationships. But in politics, where cold calculation and strict long-term planning are required, he considered it naturally misplaced. I know, this sounds like a challenge, but I have observed how companies led by men build empires, while women create atmospheres. One without the other is impossible, but substitution is catastrophic. When emotion governs logic, decisions become inconsistent. When security is more important than risk, breakthroughs do not occur. Schopenhauer was not an enemy of women. He was a witness to nature, and his words, like a mirror, do not flatter. But in them lies a truth that everyone feels who has ever looked at relationships not from the perspective of morality, but from the perspective of an observer. And perhaps this is his greatness. He did not offer comfort, he opened eyes. And for this, people either love him or fear him. And yet, the most unsettling thing in Schopenhauer's philosophy is not his accusation, but how often his words turn out to be true. He did not curse or fight against female nature. He viewed it as a naturalist would view a flower, with cold attentiveness, without illusions. He was interested in essence, not social facade. He wrote, if women were given power, over time they would judge not by laws, but by feelings. This is not a reproach, it is a prediction. I have seen it with my own eyes in circles where decisions were made more out of pity than out of pragmatism, where long meetings boiled down to a single emotional tone, where the idea of justice was replaced by the idea of sympathy. And this is beautiful in private life, but tragic in the architecture of power. Emotion is a powerful resource, but it cannot be the foundation of social institutions. Where structure is needed, emotion always tends toward exclusion, and exclusions destroy the system. Schopenhauer understood that the role of women in society is immense, but it is realized in a different way, not through manifestos, but through psychological pressure. Not through struggle, but through influence. This is why he insisted that the expansion of direct power destroys the very balance that women instinctively strive to preserve. It is a paradox. By maintaining boundaries, we preserve strength, while by breaking them, we lose both poles. However, it is important to emphasize that this is not about a hierarchy of value. Schopenhauer did not say, women are weaker. He said, women are different, and as long as society denies this difference, it will suffer, because anything that lacks its proper place begins to destroy the system from within. The female nature is like water, soft, fluid, yet capable of wearing away stone. But if water is confined to a shape that does not match its structure, it will find a way to break through, and then there will be no harmony, only a flood. I remember my philosophy professor, an intellectually deep woman, but living by intuition. She used to say, if women ruled the world, wars would be rarer, but internal strife would be endless. At the time, it seemed like a joke, but now it feels like a prophecy. Because a woman's strength lies in her hidden management, in adapting to the system, rather than in destroying it for the sake of ambition. When this power loses its subtlety, it loses grace. When power becomes overt, it turns into a heavy burden. Schopenhauer argued that the male nature suffers from the drive for greatness, while the female nature suffers from the fear of losing closeness. And both of these pains are real, but only by acknowledging their differences can a union be possible, rather than war. Where we try to be the same, tension arises. Where we allow ourselves to be different, a dance emerges. It is in this dance, as I once noticed, that true closeness is born, not in mirroring, but in complementing. According to Schopenhauer, love is not a romance, but a scene of evolution. It is not a symphony of souls, but a finely scripted play, where each actor plays a pre-written role. And only when we accept this do we begin to understand why everything happens the way it does, why passion fades, why closeness doesn't always bring a sense of completeness, and why, in the end, we leave not because we have stopped loving, but because the illusion has fulfilled its purpose. But acknowledging this is not a defeat, it is growing up. It is that very encounter with the shadow that Jung wrote about. When you finally see not the person you want to see, but the one who stands before you. When you no longer demand eternity from love, you begin to respect its temporality. You no longer seek salvation from relationships. You seek in them a reflection of truth. This is the liberation, not in renouncing love, but in understanding that love is not a heavenly gift, but an earthly mechanism. If we learn to see it as such, without embellishments, without myths, we may, for the first time, truly be in it. Not as children demanding magic, but as adults capable of holding hands even when the magic is gone. But has time truly disproven Schopenhauer, or perhaps history has proven him right in ways more intricate than he could have predicted? Today's world is one where gender roles seem to have dissolved into a general declaration of equality. Women hold positions, make decisions, run corporations, and shape political agendas. Yet the tension Schopenhauer warned of has not disappeared. It has become quieter, but deeper, hidden like an undercurrent. It drives social conflicts, breaks apart families, and distorts expectations. We live in an era that has not eliminated differences, but simply forbidden speaking of them. Schopenhauer once remarked, the idea of equality between men and women may be proclaimed, but nature never signed this manifesto. The words are harsh, but eerily accurate. He did not deny women's ability to think, create, or influence. He spoke of something else, of vectors, of the direction of the inner drive, that a man strives for the horizon, while a woman seeks a safe harbor, that the former lives in tomorrow, while the latter lives in the present. And this is not a choice, it is instinct. I have often witnessed how formally identical roles were played according to completely different rules. One of my colleagues, ambitious to the point of fanaticism, sacrificed his personal life for projects that promised results decades down the line. His partner, a wise, highly sensitive woman, viewed his drive as emotional self-destruction. For her, it was important that the home be warm, that dinner be shared together, not over Zoom. They could not agree, not because they were incompatible, but because their instincts pulled them in different directions of time. Schopenhauer did not call for a rejection of progress. He warned that if we forget about nature, progress itself becomes an illusion. And today, we see how under the banners of equality, families are falling apart, roles are lost, and dozens of partnership formats emerge, in which no one feels whole. Why? Because the drive for sameness breeds not love, but boredom. Not harmony, but alienation. Not strength, but resentment. He said that instinct is always stronger than ideology, and this is confirmed everywhere. We can teach the same children the same words, the same values, the same rules, but when a crisis comes, everyone reacts in their own way, men through aggression or isolation, women through emotion, social coordination, or internal protest. This is neither good nor bad, it's biology. And the whole problem begins where culture demands that both react the same way. This, according to Schopenhauer, is the fundamental mistake of modernity. Personally, I have experienced this in therapeutic practice. In couples where both partners said, "We want to be equal," there was almost always underlying fatigue because one was unconsciously waiting for leadership and the other for a nurturing space. But no one could express this for fear of being accused of outdated thinking. And here's the interesting thing: as soon as I voiced not a taboo, but the truth that the desire to protect and be protected is not a stereotype but an archetype, the faces of these people relaxed, as if someone had finally allowed them to be themselves. This is the most frightening thing, when a person is forbidden from being who they have become not by choice, but by nature. Schopenhauer claimed, if society goes against nature, nature takes revenge. Quietly, but irreversibly, an inner emptiness appears, anxiety without reason, a sense of alienation in one's own body, in relationships, in life. And the further we progress along the path of ideological symmetry, the more we feel it. We lose not control, but meaning. We no longer know who to be, and we are afraid to admit that we don't want to be who we are taught to be. The paradox is that even in an era of freedom and blurred roles, women still influence more, but not directly, rather through culture, trends, psychological fashion. But the essence remains the same, to guide, not to storm. Schopenhauer called this power hidden beneath tenderness. Men rule, women shape the rulers. This happens outside of regulations, outside of constitutions, but it is precisely where everything is decided. And this is confirmed again and again. When a woman appears next to a man, he changes not by command, but by nature. And if she is wise, he flourishes. If she demands that he become like her, he gets lost. And so, returning to the eternal debate, nature or nurture, it becomes clear, nurture can guide, but it cannot replace. It can soften, but it cannot undo. Men are characterized by ambition, conquest, and the drive for overcoming. Women are characterized by rootedness, subtle sensitivity, and the preservation of structure. We can call it whatever we like, rename it, rewrite it, but the essence remains, because it is written not in a textbook, but in the blood. The most destructive thing is ignoring this truth, because, as Schopenhauer wrote, it is impossible to change the essence without destroying the form. When men are expected to be emotionally flexible like women, and women are expected to be strategically straightforward like men, they become a parody of each other. And misunderstanding, disappointment, and loneliness arise, all under the guise of closeness. Schopenhauer did not believe that men and women could not coexist. He believed that this is only possible in one case, if they stop trying to be the same. The only way forward is not a struggle for equality, but the acceptance of differences. This is not discrimination. It is maturity, when you recognize the other not as a copy of yourself, but as a different side of the whole. Not higher, not lower, just different. In this, there may lie the most unsettling yet salvational truth. We do not have to fully understand each other, but we must learn to respect the difference that cannot be explained but can be felt, and only then is true connection possible. Not through unification, but through a deep recognition, you are not like me, and in that lies your strength.